welcome to this Stogie Geeks Extra Cigar Rights of America special. I'm your host tonight, Will Cooper, and what I want to start off with our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Mr. J's Havana Smoke Shop, located here, or up there, I should say, in Rhode Island. They have an outstanding selection of premium handmade cigars. And by the Havana Cigar Club, also located in Warwick, Rhode Island. It's a great place to enjoy a drink and a cigar. Stogie Geeks and Cigar Coop listeners can find a $5 off coupon on our website by clicking the HCC logo. And by Debonair Cigars. Visit stogiegeeks.com/Debonair for a list of retailers who carry Debonair. Buy some today and get a little more Debonair. And by Ocean State Cigars. Try the J. Grotto series, including the Connecticut Shade Silk and the limited edition J. Grotto Reserve lines. This week, the official announcement came of the new J. Grotto anniversary, which will be launched at the 2014 IPCPR trade show. Visit Cigar Coop for a preview of this cigar, and visit OceanStateCigars.com for a full list of retailers near you. Good evening, everyone. We have a special Cigar Rights of America edition of the Stogie Geeks. I'm your host, Will Cooper, and we had a couple of Stogie Geeks out of commission tonight. We have one under the weather, and we have one traveling tonight. So we were planning our 100th anniversary gala tonight, or 100th show gala, but really I felt we needed to have a majority here, and at the same time I felt we could focus tonight on cigar rights. So we're going to be joined in a minute. I'll introduce him, Glenn Loope, the Executive Director of Cigar Rights of America. What I want to announce first is that there'll be a couple of special things for this show tonight. First of all, there's going to be a CRA promotion, and any new member of CRA, anyone who joins CRA for the first time tonight for a minimum of 1 year and uses my ambassador code referral number, 0159, the Stogie Geeks are going to provide 2 premium cigars on top of the cigars you get from Cigar Rights of America. And based on the membership level you get, if you sign up for 1 year, you'll get a minimum of 2 cigars. So you'll walk out with a minimum of 4 cigars by signing up tonight. This will go to the first 10 new members of CRA that sign up tonight, and the offer will expire on June 30th. So if you're listening to the podcast and we still have some open slots, you can feel free to do that. There'll also be a special contest at the end of this segment, and I have a couple of 3-packs of La Aroma de Cubas, and there'll be a trivia question we'll do at the end of the show, and so stay tuned for that. So with all the housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce our special guest tonight, Mr. Glenn Loope. He is the Executive Director of Cigar Rights of America. Glenn, it's Will Cooper down in North Carolina. How you doing tonight?
Will, always a pleasure to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's very muggy. The weather is really, the humidity is starting to kick in North Carolina this week.
Well, I swore after the winter we just had, where walking the dogs every night in snow and ice, I was not going to complain all summer long about how hot it was.
Are you up in Virginia right now?
I am.
Yep. Yeah, so it's definitely, it's summer is about to kick in the Mid-Atlantic, to say the least.
So and Glenn, Washington is no place to be virtually any time of the year, but especially now. The one thing that we have to question the founding fathers on is why they built Washington, D.C. on top of a swamp, but that's neither here nor there now.
That's good. Good point. Is there a lot of, in the D.C. area, did they have like a lot of mosquitoes up there too?
Yes, I could say something funny about that, but there's a lot of blood sucking going on in Washington, D.C., and some of them are actually mosquitoes. I can't believe I just said that. But anyway.
This is the Stogie Geeks. You could feel free to let loose tonight.
See, and I'm wearing my Washington Redskins bow tie in protest of the patent office decision against the Redskins. So,
let me ask a question on that. Is a name change imminent now? Is that what the talk is now? Is Snyder going to do it, or
not
can he
at all?
Still
The team will appeal to the D.C. Circuit. They've been ruled against before by the patent office, and the team appealed it to the D.C. District and Court of Appeals and won there in the past, and they fully intend to do so again. all the patents and trademarks are valid through the appeals process, and the team anticipates another victory. So there's been reading the commentary on this has just been absolutely fascinating. People that are Cowboys fans saying, for today they're Redskins fans just because of what our a federal agency did to the team.
It's really amazing that our own government can do this to us.
Well, it actually parlays into the very reason we're having this discussion tonight. It is all about the nanny state. It is all about political correctness, and you put all that together, and it's why there is a Cigar Rights of America, and it's why there are so many organizations that have blossomed that are totally built around the notion of personal freedom and expression, and that brings us to the very passion that we all share for a great cigar. So, what happened at the patent office is sort of a metaphor for everything else we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Now, actually, because I can't see you on the video right now, are you smoking a cigar right now?
I am, and it is really neat to have one in my office, and I'm sipping a gin and tonic while I'm at it.
There we go. What are you smoking?
I never talk about what I'm smoking. When you have 60 cigar companies supporting an organization, all right, but I'll digress. I'm smoking a Padron 64 Anniversary.
There you go. Well, because Paul's not here, I'm smoking a Fuente Opus X here, just to kind of make him feel bad. That's one of Paul's favorites, and I never smoke Opus X's on the show. But I
only smoke cigars from corporate sponsors. So that's the rule of thumb.
We do plenty of that. So Glenn, let's get right into this. So obviously the thing that's probably consuming a lot of your time is the pending FDA regulations. What I want to do is I want to start off with, in terms of, there's this document that's more like this book or whatever it is. It's called the FDA deeming document. And for our audience who might not be familiar with what a deeming document is, could you kind of take us through what that means?
Sure. When Congress granted the FDA comprehensive regulatory authority over all tobacco products, it only pertained to cigarettes and smokeless and roll your own products. To expand it beyond that, they have to go through what's called a deeming process. Anything that's made out of tobacco is eligible to be deemed a tobacco product by the FDA. They promised 9 different times that they were going to do this since they had the regulatory authority granted to them in 2009. Many people thought that the economic stimulus package was going to be the president's first act signed by him after he was initially sworn in as president. It wasn't. It was the Tobacco Control Act. That was the first act that the president signed. We wrote an article in June of 2009, and every bit of it's come true. When you grant any federal agency the authority to do something, they're going to do it. It's just a matter of time. So beginning in April of 2010 through the most recent past, which was the president's comprehensive regulatory agenda, which was issued on Christmas Eve, virtually almost Christmas Eve, of 2012 and 13, Thanksgiving, July 4th recess, the president seemed to have a penchant for holidays to issue his regulatory agenda. And each time, cigars and the intent to deem cigars subject to regulation was in that document or posted in the Federal Register, again, 9 times before that. And so they eventually, shall we say, made good on their promise. And that was the reason that we had the legislation filed in Congress to exempt premium handmade cigars from FDA oversight, because we saw that this was going to be coming down the pike. So the deeming document, and I don't know if I'm going to hold this up. I don't know if your viewers can see it or the like.
They can see it.
This is the deeming document. That's how thick it is. It's 241 pages of federal regulation to deem e-cigarettes, hookah, pipe tobacco, and cigars to be subject to federal oversight. It's the very moment that we all feared, and we never knew exactly when it was going to come. They always put deadlines in the document, in the Federal Register, stating when they intended, and they missed every single deadline until the most recent. And we were all in Indiana preparing for the Midwest Smokeout, a huge event, 1,200 folks in Indiana, Hammond, Indiana. And then we were exhibiting at the NRA convention that very weekend of April 23rd, 24th, 25th. Um, and boom, the rumors started to fly like crazy. I'm looking at my calendar. The rumors started to fly like crazy on Wednesday, the 23rd of April, that the agency was going to come out. And there had been some congressional testimony given by the FDA to some various committees that hinted that this was an imminent act of the agency. We heard that the regs were going to be issued by midnight that Wednesday night, the 23rd. Then we heard that it was going to be postponed until the next morning. Then at about 9:02 on Thursday morning, the 24th, excuse me, they issued the document. And there was an immediate scouring of the document to find out what was in it. And a lot of our worst fears came true. And so the deeming document, to give you that piece of background before your probably next question, is how we got to this process. The agency was given the authority. They were initially only given the authority over cigarettes and smokeless, but they had the authority to broaden that, and they had to go through this formal deeming process. And that's where we are today.
Now, because I guess when we started hearing it, we a lot of the talk was originally they were going to make a ruling on the e-cigarette stuff. Was it a surprise that the tobacco and from cigars and pipes were lumped into that, or did you guys expect that?
Not at all. Not at all. The rumor mill in Washington was saying for quite some time that the agency didn't want to piecemeal it. They didn't want to put out an e-cigarette regulation, then come out with a pipe regulation, then come out with a hookah regulation, then come out with a cigar regulation. It's very much a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's the very thing that we're trying to prevent is a one-size-fits-all approach to the regulatory process. And so that's the reason they're all lumped in together. Frankly, if it weren't for e-cigarettes, I'm not convinced we would be having this discussion.
That's interesting, because it's funny. I've heard a lot of people just in shops, saying, "Hey, e-cigarettes may save us because the government's going to be focused on that." And even when the announcement was made, when the deeming document came out, a lot of the mainstream media they focused all on e-cigarettes, and cigars were not mentioned on a lot of newscasts, which was alarming because I was telling people,
absolutely.
No, cigars are in this.
I mean, we were almost a footnote in the national media. Literally a footnote when it all hit on April the 24th and through the weekend of the 25th and 26th. And we were, it was a mad scramble with our attorneys, with our lobbying team, with the board of directors, with the entire industry. It was the most incredible moment that we thought we'd been preparing for over 3 years, but you never know how you're going to react to it until you get to that moment. 2-hour board meetings, constant around the clock calls with our attorneys. I told Lito Gomez, I said, if something happens to my health over the next year, it's not going to be because of cigars. It's going to be because of the radiation permeating from my cell phone being married to my ear for the last 55 days.
Wow.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. We can talk more about that later, but that's the nature of the deeming document. I don't know. Do you want to get into some of the specifics in the document at this time, or?
Well, let's get into some of those. Yeah, let's get into some of the specifics. And I don't think it hurts to review that for the audience. So why don't we do that?
Well, it's fun to have a gin and tonic while you're on the air. It's pretty cool.
You're a stogie geek, Glenn. You fit right in.
In the document, there are several things that the entire industry has a great deal of reason to fear. One is that the guideline that to be declared a premium cigar, it has to retail for at least $10, when over 85% of the market is $9.99 or less. So declaring that to be a premium cigar has to cost $10 it's a non-starter. It's a misnomer. We're really not sure where they got it. I've heard all kinds of stories about where they got that. I asked Mitch Zeller, the director of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products. I was at a conference that he was speaking to in Williamsburg, Virginia, about 3 weeks ago. And I asked him outright. I said, Mr. Zeller, what was the basis for that? And he said, market research. And he said the same thing about a week or two before that to the House Energy and Commerce Committee, because it was one of our allies posed that question. Where did you get the $10 number? And they said market research. And then I heard that one night that it was off of a speech that I'd given where I said flippantly, children don't smoke $10 cigars. So the idea that some anecdote like that could be made national policy is pretty silly. But let's just say for the sake of argument, it was based on market research. It's up to us to disprove that during the course of this public comment phase. And we'll have a lot to say about the public comment phase very, very shortly, I'm sure.
Yep.
The other pieces of the puzzle in here are no free samples of any kind. And that goes back to an era and a day when they could foresee, envisioned when Copenhagen and Winston cigarettes could be thrown into the stands at a NASCAR event. The idea of no free sample. Well, that's really a type of a regulation that I'm sure they really meant for e-cigarettes. And it's coming at us because, again, of this attempt at a one-size-fits-all regulatory model. And it simply doesn't work for premium handmade cigars. Handmade cigars are an investment. And as you well know, these wonderful manufacturers that surround this industry, they come out with a wonderful new cigar, a wonderful new blend. They walk into a cigar shop and they hand everybody one saying, I hope you like it, so that you'll buy 5 of them or buy 2 of them or buy a box of them. Everybody's palate is different, and convincing them that everybody's palate is different and cigars have very different characteristics based upon aging and fermentation and the blending of the magic that goes into blending these leaves in together to create these wonderful products that we all have this passion for. Convincing them that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this industry is a challenge indeed. And so getting rid of this no free sample notion has got to go. It's non-negotiable. It's got to go. The other piece of the puzzle is path to market, and it's probably the most detrimental to the entire premium handmade cigar industry. The cigar industry simply doesn't have the margins that the cigarette industry does. They can make 1 trillion of them. The premium cigar industry is 0.5% of the entire tobacco universe. And that means that you can't impose that same type of regulatory schism upon this industry. Basically, what you're talking about here is a February 15th, 2007. Every new cigar that's been put on the market since February 15th, 2007 would have to go through either a substantial equivalency test to prove that that product, that cigar, is similar, identical virtually, to a product you had on the market prior to February 15th, 2007. Or you're going to have to go through the new product process, which requires scientific testing, chemical analysis, the whole 9 yards. The FDA itself puts in their deeming document, in that document I showed your viewers, that it will take a applicant, a cigar company, 5,000 hours to go through the approval process. During that same TMA meeting, Tobacco Merchants Association meeting, where I spoke to Mr. Zeller, a representative of Republic Tobacco was talking about a cigarette product that they were trying to get a permit for. When they applied for the permit, their kid was a sophomore in high school. When he got the permit, his kid was a freshman in college. It took 863 days to get the permit. Right now, the FDA is almost 4 years behind, almost 4,000 applications behind on approving new products for cigarettes and smokeless. The estimate is that it would be an additional 10,000 applications just for the cigar industry to go through this process. Think about all the amazing cigars you and I have smoked, Will Cooper. Think about the amazing cigars you and I have smoked together since we met, much less since 2007. And compelling those companies to go through that type of a bureaucratic process, which would cost anywhere from $40,000 to $500,000, and for a brand new product, conservatively speaking, could cost between $1 and $1.7 million to go through an approval process. Well, as you well know, that wipes out the entire boutique cigar market. And how many major manufacturers among us, and I'm not talking about the multinational types, that would bother to go through that type of a process to continue to put great cigars on the market. And so that's a tremendous fear factor that we have inside of this existing deeming document. I started rambling there, buddy. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So, I had heard, when the deeming document came out, there were other fears that weren't in the document. There was the fear about the concept of no more walk-in humidors. banning flavored cigars, eliminating cigar marketing. Where do those things stand? Are they things that we still need to be concerned about?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. Those fears are very, very much alive. You have to remember this. Everybody that watches this cast, everybody that follows the politics of cigars, you have to, if you remember anything that I say, please remember this. The commissioner of the FDA and Mitch Zeller, the director of the Center for Tobacco Products at the FDA, stated that this is, quote, a foundational document. A foundational document. This is a first step. This is no different than the coal industry. I used to do a lot of consulting in my previous life with the coal business. This is a preamble of what's to come. We know that they despise the idea of self-service tobacco sales. We know that they want to impose advertising and marketing restrictions. We know that they despise the idea of us being able to walk into a humidor and touch it, smell it, and feel it before we've ever purchased it. This document, this 241 pages, is simply a first step. We have no doubt this is going to evolve into manufacturing guidelines, which would be decimating to our Latin American producers. We know that there's plans on the drawing board for advertising and marketing restrictions. There's pieces in this document right here on the imposition of warning labels across the board for the very first time on our great cigar manufacturers. Items that show that the agency is truly out of touch with the reality of what this industry is all about. It doesn't cater to children. We don't sell to children. It's not chemically addictive. Doesn't have the same health implications. It's like the day that we were briefing a member of the United States Senate, and we put a copy of Cigar Aficionado in front of them, and they flip it through the pages, and they go, cigar ad, expensive car, cigar ad, expensive watch, cigar ad, expensive wine. You're not marketing to children. And we're like, well, thank you for getting it. And we've tried to convey that same message to the agency, and obviously we still have a lot of education to go. But again, this goes back to the notion of a one-size-fits-all regulatory mantra, is that stuff may apply to other tobacco products, but it doesn't apply to these. And that's the point we have to get across during the course of this public comment phase. So everything you listed there that is not in this document, you can bet will be in a future one, and a future one, and another one in the future. Now that the Congress has granted and the President has signed this bill that gave the agency this regulatory authority in 2009, they're not going to roll it back. The question is how we can play stopgap measures into the future using the political process, the legislative process, the public pressure process to get what we need to protect this industry.
So, obviously in the document there was there were the two options. Obviously, and option 2 is the one where there is some room for an exemption with limitations. And I guess I look at it and it seems like that the FDA has, in their minds, put what a definition of a premium cigar is. And then I think the cigar industry has a definition of what that premium cigar is. And there's absolutely a gap, to say the least. Has there been talk of trying to maybe negotiate what that definition is between the two parties as we're in this period right now?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the option. Option 1 would impose the same type of regulatory schism that's over cigarettes over the entire tobacco universe. And it would be just absolutely detrimental to the premium handmade cigar industry. Option 2 dangled the proposition of an exemption for premium cigars, and that and we say this very clearly, is a direct result of the legislative legwork that was done by IPCPR and the CRA since the beginning of the 112th Congress. And that's the reason that we initiated that legislation. And through the course of over 350 congressional briefings, we finally got the message across on Capitol Hill about how premium handmade cigars are different than other tobacco products and shouldn't be treated the same. And that's the reason a tremendous number of those who voted for the original Tobacco Control Act signed onto our legislation through the 112th and 113th Congress, saying that premium handmade cigars ought to be treated differently. And that really is the heart and soul of why there is even an option 2 on the table. Now, within that, to hypothetically, and I mean hypothetically, get the exemption, you, as you noted, would have to meet that definitional description that was put in the deeming document. With that, predominantly long filler, all natural tobacco, all natural, binder leaf wrapper, 100% tobacco, no filter tip or mouthpiece, and a cap applied by hand, quote unquote, weighs at least 6 pounds per thousand. Basically, everything there we felt, to this day, virtually defines a premium handmade cigar. Then they threw in the $10 piece, and that's what threw it off. So the CRA Board of Directors has endorsed the FDA definition of premium cigar, except for the $10 price point. Except for that point, they came close to getting it right.
So, obviously, there's talk. Do you think a price point is going to be a part, if option 2 happens, will there be a price point? And is this something like S-chip where, a number's being thrown out there, but it will be negotiated? Or is this something that it's going to be $10 or nothing?
No, I don't personally believe that. In the history of federal regulation and the attorneys that we've consulted with, in the history of federal regulation, the federal government has really never tried to dictate the price of a consumer product. Think about all the consumer products that they had the latitude to delve into and dictate price for the sake of either politics or consumer whims or whatever the case might be, or the regulatory process. And they haven't. So why premium cigars at this juncture? So it's really, again, a rather silly type of thing to use that as a benchmark, other than trying to make the case that kids, again, aren't accessing the product. But based upon that school of thought, then why shouldn't the federal government dictate the price of other tobacco products in order to discourage their purchase? So it doesn't make sense for premium cigars.
Do they do that for cigarettes?
So really, I don't think in the end that'll be the case. I think that could be the subject of litigation. There's some school of thought that there are antitrust concerns with that. So there's a lot of moving parts to try to kill that part of the proposal.
Interesting. Is there so as far as going back to this proposal, what's been the cigar industries? Has there been any? We've been hearing talk that there's a lot of different factions in the cigar industry. There's obviously one is the mass market machine made makers. Then there's, I'd say, the large premium cigar makers is a second group. Then there's the boutique cigar makers, and then you have the infused cigar makers. In terms of your job, has this been a very difficult thing to balance? And how close are all these different factions on the same page right now?
Well, let's put it this way. I really wouldn't want to relive the last 50 days. Yeah. It's been an absolute, balancing act. The industry has had to do a lot of soul searching. You would think that an industry that's been around for about 400 years would know what it is. But these guys, fundamentally just want to make great cigars. They just want to make great cigars with as little government interference as humanly possible. And so it's really never had to confront the politics of intrusion the way they have now. Behind me, I've got a copy of the book, Velvet Glove, Iron Fist, on a history of the anti-smoking movement. And if you read that, you get 3/4 of the way through it, and you realize if the cigar industry had started to play the political game a little differently in the late 80s, early 90s, it may be a very different ball game today. But as I'm fond of saying, it's not going to be the first industry, and it's not going to be the last that calls its way back from political Armageddon. But so in that respect, it's almost been, I don't say this dramatically, but it's almost been a healthy exercise for the industry to have to be compelled to do this type of soul searching as to what it is, fundamentally what it is. And so that's been the nature of the bantering back and forth on what is a cigar, premium cigar, what differentiates different types of cigars from mass market products and even from other tobacco products that the agency already has regulatory control over. And now we're coming to this point where we're having to put on paper what we are, whether or not we do and do not agree with the agency on these different parts of the proposal. And I think we're dangerously close to that. By tomorrow afternoon, around 3 o'clock, we should have about 90 pages worth of public comment prepared from our perspective. Um, Kind of to circle back to a part of your question, we had an initial meeting on April the 30th in Washington of the CAA, the IPCPR, and us at the CRA. We're striving for as much unity as humanly possible. There is complete unity in all sectors of the cigar market, on what the common denominators are that have to be fought inside this deeming document. And I think that's a very positive exercise politically for the industry to go through. So I hope that answers your question.
That definitely does. That definitely does. And you kind of just touched on that, and I think it's a good segue. So, as a part of what was in the deeming document is this period of public comment. Why don't you first explain what that is, and then we can get into specifics on how folks need to engage with that.
It's a critical part of the process. This is democracy in action. I call it cigar democracy in action. This is the opportunity for cigar enthusiasts across the country to come to the defense of this industry. It's an opportunity for them to, one, say that yes, premium cigars should be granted an exemption under option 2. 2, that premium cigars are not chemically addictive. 3, that they're not sold and marketed to America's youth. 4, that they are a passion enjoyed by discerning adults. On our site, on cigarrights.org, there's 3 different spots. You can't miss it. On cigarrights.org, there's 3 different spots where you can click to our FDA page. We provide about 9 different speaking points as to the messages that we want conveyed and we think appropriately reflect the attitude and the characteristics of premium cigar smokers across the country. We have a preamble, we have the body, we have a closing, cut, paste, compose your own message. Use what we've suggested there as the basis for composing your own thoughts and feelings about this. Then there's 2 different spots there, where you can click and go to reg.gov, the FDA site, to post your comment. We want to put 6 digits worth of comments into the agency. 1, because it can slow down the process. 2, to dramatize the magnitude of what they're undertaking. 3, to depict that cigar smokers in this country are not going to sit idly by and take this type of federal intrusion into America's humidors. So it's imperative to play a role in the process. And by statute, by law, they have to consider your comment, yours, Will, personally yours. They have to acknowledge what you say and I say and every company says individually and what we as trade associations say. That has to be taken into account. They cannot get around that. So that's the nature of this beast. And the comments have jumped from about 11,000 from a week ago to about 33,000, predominantly from premium cigar smokers. They need to hear from America's cigar enthusiasts, and this is the opportunity to play a part in this process. So the lawyers will be chiming in, the individual companies will be chiming in, the associations will be chiming in, but there's nothing like 6 digits, multiple 6 digits, worth of cigar enthusiasts letting the FDA know that they're on the wrong track with this industry.
And when does the public comment period expire?
Well, it formally expires on July the 9th. There's been over 2,000 requests for a comment period extension. And CRA and IPCPR and the Cigar Association of America have all, within a few days of each other, requested that it was the first act. The first act was to ask for a comment period extension. It's taken them 4 years to come up with this document. 4 years. Then they walk up and say, I'm sorry, folks, you got 75 days to get your act together to answer over 78 different points that apply exclusively to cigars. 78. And it's simply just unfathomable that the industry could answer the types of questions, the nature of the questions that they presented in that 241 pages in that period of time. So we're hoping to hear it may be as early as tomorrow. In fact, we're hoping it's tomorrow. We've heard rumblings that it was going to be anywhere from last Friday to this Friday. Again, the Washington rumor mill. Take it for what it's worth, but it's somewhat of a pulse. And we're hoping to hear here in the next day or two that the comment period extension has been granted for at least another 60 to 75 days, and it can be perpetuated beyond that, which is basically exactly what happened to the menthol question, also confronted by the FDA.
So let's say worst case, the comment period ends on July 9th, and that's about 8 to 9 days before the trade show. What does that mean going into the trade show? What does the FDA do once that period closes?
Well, they start to review. It doesn't have any regulatory impact. July 9th has no regulatory impact. So taking your premise, it's over on July 9th, the comments closed, blah, blah, blah. The trade show opens on July 18th? I'm looking at my calendar. July 19th. It has zero impact on this year's show. They begin the review of the comments that have been submitted by the trade groups and the general public. That could take 6 months. It could take 8 months. Right now, the projection is it could take into the fall of 2015 to properly go through that exercise before a final rule is eventually developed and put out. So it could have a dramatic impact, hypothetically, on the show next year in New Orleans, which may explain why we've gotten so much support out of the state of Louisiana for our position.
Sure. So, in terms of, is it, let's say that review period, is it better to have the FDA take more time for that, or does that give what I'd say enemies of tobacco more of a chance again to just lean on the FDA like they have been?
Both.
I mean, is it better? Is it shorter or longer?
Both. They both are bad. Well, I say bad and good. It's good for us that the period extension would take place because we desperately need the time to continue our mobilization efforts with America's cigar enthusiasts, and much less the company and trade association comments that have to be submitted, which are incredibly technical in nature. There is no doubt there's a tremendous amount of public health community pressure on the agency to reject the exemption. In fact, a coalition of about 42 healthcare groups issued a letter yesterday to the FDA demanding that they reject an exemption for any form of cigar, and much less that versus the fact that we're also going up against big tobacco. And I can say that for the record because companies like Philip Morris have gone on record against an exemption for our product category. So there's plenty of enemies out there. Let's put it that way.
So a lot of what I've heard from cynics is that a couple years ago there was a petition put out to the president asking for this exemption, and it basically took 2 years for a response, and the response was basically a canned response. And oh, by the way, the guy who did the response was basically the guy, it was from the agency we were trying to get the exemption from.
The one I brought up the $10 piece.
What was that?
The one who broke the response for the White House, Mitch Zeller, was the one I referred to that I spoke to about the $10 price point.
Yep, that's right. So I hear that there's some people very frustrated. Obviously, it didn't come from even the White House on that.
Well, he spoke on their behalf.
Yeah,
it was on the White House letter. Let's put it that way. He responded on behalf of the administration.
Someone more from the president?
What's that?
Was that a surprise that it was Zeller, or was that kind of expecting that would be the response? Where it would come from?
Honestly, I thought it would either be from him or Secretary Sebelius, the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Okay.
I really didn't think it was going to come under Obama's signature. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So how is this
honestly,
different?
I don't think it was a canned response either.
Right.
It doesn't mean I agree with it. I disagree with everything in it. But it was not a canned response. It was very methodical, and in fact, it reflects a lot of the verbiage that's in the 241-page deeming document. So they're making their case. Believe me, they're making their case to try to rule this industry.
Yeah, they are. But in terms of people who are now going back to the public period and they're filling out this public comment, should they? I mean, I want to make sure people know it's important to do because a lot of people I think felt with the presidential petition, hey, that was the answer they got. What's to say the FDA won't do it again with all these hundreds of thousands of comments? Is there some ray of hope why this is real important so people know to go out there and do this?
And because you've got to remember the industry responses can lead to litigation. You've got to keep that in mind. A lot of what's in the deeming document and a lot of the responses that have been given to us by the agency to date, a lot of the things that have been put in here that are of serious concern to the industry and how we respond to those can be the basis for future litigation as an option. So that's very important to remember throughout this process. And I'll give you another tidbit, and we're getting ready to release this, so this is sort of, CNN breaking news for Stogie Geeks. Wow. This is a public comment that was issued by the President's Small Business Administration. It's the SBA talking to the FDA. And the Small Business Administration has issued this letter to them saying that their estimation on the economic impact of these regulations have been grossly underestimated, and that there are severe consequences for American small businesses as a result of what's in that deeming document beside me. So this is within the administration that this debate is taking place. And we're going to put this out in the next day or so to have acknowledged that there is serious debate within the very administration submitting these rules about what this could mean economically to this country, to the small businesses, to the community tobacconists that dot Main Street America, to the supply chain that spans from the port of Miami to a cigar shop in Anchorage, Alaska. And it also, in this letter, documents and states that their rule would apply to 90% of the companies that they're targeted at. That's an amazing commentary right here. That of the thousands of small business community tobacconists, of the entire supply chain, of the over 40 corporate offices for the premium cigar industry that spans from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale to Miami, that 90% of them are considered small business by the SBA standards, and that these rules can be economically detrimental to those businesses, and that the FDA has failed to take that into account. That's an amazing commentary, Will, right here.
I'm sitting there from the administration.
From within their own administration.
So that's so in terms of you guys are going to make an announcement on that, and does that now kind of, with this whole, it's kind of I kind of look at it, there's this whole chain of things, does this play back into some of the folks you're working on Congress right now as you're starting to look for co-sponsors and getting support within the Senate and the House? Is that something now that you guys can go and bring to them and now weigh back political pressure?
We're going to be floating that letter all over the Capitol. It reinforces the very message that we've been touting on Capitol Hill for the last 4 years. It says to the members of the House Small Business Committee, the Senate Small Business Committee, to our sponsors and those would-be sponsors, that we haven't been whistling Dixie here, that this is real, and that by their own estimates, what they're putting on the table can be economically detrimental to a serious percentage of the premium cigar business interests in this country. Much less the international trade impact. We haven't even broached on that, but I'll give you just a tidbit on it. One, we announced today in our membership release, I'm sure you saw it, but that, wait a minute, we didn't put that part in it. So this is more breaking news. But we've met with the ranking Republican and Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee for Western Hemisphere, which covers Latin America. We're going to get some support and cooperation there in terms of requesting an assessment of what these regulations mean economically and politically to Latin America. That's a serious component of this overall process. It very much is a foreign affairs discussion. In the president's unified regulatory agenda, they acknowledge that there's international trade impacts to this. Therefore, we've been having strategy sessions with the embassy staff for Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. We've also had discussions with the embassies for those countries that channel a lot of prime cigar wrapper, binder, and filler leaf to those countries for the production of the cigars, namely Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico. We've had wonderful discussions with the international community that are all in Washington on this question. They're being very supportive. Just last, I think it was Wednesday, we had a roundtable with the principal staff of Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican on this very question and how they can assist with conveying the message as to what these regulations mean to their countries. So this letter from the SBA is just about domestic jobs, just about domestic businesses that exist in the continental United States, much less the international implications of what's in those 241 pages.
So just so I guess our listeners and viewers kind of know, from these the economic impact, that was a study that was done, if I'm not correct, by the Office of Management and Budget late last year, correct? And that was what came out of that?
No, OMB has not conducted an assessment. OMB has not calculated a true economic impact of what these regulations mean. We've asked for that, and when we last met with them, I'm trying to think about when it was sometime before the regs came out. Gosh, it was early spring. Might have been March. It's all running together, buddy. But the last time that we met with White House OMB, I presented a list of 13 different areas that I thought that they should be compelled, or FDA should be compelled, somebody should be compelled to study before regulations could move forward to a final rule type of phase. I mean, for example, we were talking about the trade show. It's not just IPCPR. There's other trade shows that feature premium cigars that call Las Vegas home. The TPE show, the National Association of Tobacco Outlets show, the World Tobacco Expo in Reno. There's other trade shows that feature premium cigars that call Nevada home, much less New Orleans and the show going back there next year, and the very friendly nature that New Orleans has to our industry. What's the economic impact there? What's the economic impact on the state of Florida, on the state of Pennsylvania? We facilitated a letter from a member of Congress from Connecticut to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture demanding an economic impact analysis on Connecticut tobacco farmers with these regulations. So all these are moving parts out there to hopefully throw a giant monkey wrench in this process and get the point across that this is a much bigger piece of pie that bite off than they think. And none of those questions have truly been answered. So OMB has not answered those questions. No one has, and that's a part of our argument as to why this shouldn't go forward.
Very, very interesting. So that's some really that's some positive news that we've heard, from the SBA. I mean, that's something that's good for our side right now.
It's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Glenn, how much time do you have?
I'm all yours, my friend.
Okay. Hey, Chris, do we want to take a quick break and then come back? We'll just do a little more with Glenn.